Hey guys, welcome to my new dial-in series where I take some of my favorite amplifiers and dial them in and show you how I get these really good crushing metal tones on them, whether it's for rhythms or for leads. I'm going to show you from start to finish how I achieve these tones. So today we're going to get started with the Mark V 25, which is one of my favorite amplifiers. This amp was really surprising to me because it really has this big fat sound in it, and it's just so small, and it's only 25 watts, but it does not sound like a 25-watt amp. It has thunderous low end, tons of crushing palm mutes that I do with it, and it just sounds incredible. And it's got a really nice top end to it that's just under the searing level, and it's very pleasant to the ears, but it gives me a lot of great articulation and pick attack like you heard in that song that we started the video with. So this amplifier has two channels on it, okay? You can use channel 1 for either clean or crunch. We're going to concentrate on the crunch end of things today. And channel 2 we're going to use for a really good lead tone. It has several modes, but the mode we're going to concentrate on today is Mark IV mode. Now this amp is a bit of an anomaly to a lot of people that aren't familiar with the Mark series amps. It's not your typical amp where you set everything at noon and you kind of fine-tune things from there. As you can see, it has this EQ section right over here. Now what this EQ section does is it adds a lot of fullness and a lot of really great magic to the amplifier. And if you don't use it, it actually kind of sounds like an AM radio. It's really weird. It's got this really dull, dark kind of sound to it. But as soon as you flip the EQ on, it just comes alive. And it just sounds freaking amazing. And it feels really good as well. Let me demonstrate how important and how powerful this EQ is for you right now. I'm going to turn it off and play a riff, and then I'm going to turn it on and play that same riff again, and you're going to hear what this EQ can do. Okay, so if that doesn't convince you as to how powerful this EQ is, I don't know what else I could say. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this amp and put everything at noon, and then we'll dial it in from there. And take a look at the screen. These are the actual settings that I'm using right now and that I used in the song at the beginning of this video. So take a screenshot of these if you want, and you can apply these to your amp if you want to achieve those tones. Now keep in mind everybody's guitar and pickups are a little different. And also keep in mind that I slammed it with an overdrive because I slam every amp with an overdrive. So the overdrive that I used in that song and that I will be using in this video is the KSR Eros. And man, I gotta tell you, if you don't have one of these yet, better go get one because this is the most versatile, most awesome sounding and feeling overdrive pedal I've ever used in my life. So definitely take a look at one of those and consider getting one. Alright, so here we are with everything set at noon on the amplifier. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the EQ on because I would never use this amp without the EQ, and I don't think Mesa Boogie recommends that you do that either. So let's go ahead and leave it on. And the first thing I'm going to do is set the EQ up because that is a very important part of the amplifier. It's kind of the mastering section. So let's go ahead and dial that in right now. Now, the typical thing that people do is they put it in the V shape, okay? Now that's a good start. So we'll go ahead and set that up in a V shape. And then we're going to go ahead and turn our knobs on the amplifier on the top row, which is channel 1, in a way that we would normally do on most amplifiers too. This is kind of a typical kind of section of the amp. So you can go ahead and set these up in a typical manner. Probably going to want to turn the treble up a little bit. And this is a very mid-heavy amp, so you can scoop the mids a little bit. And it has a lot of low end in it. Now because it's a 25 watt, you can actually put more low end in this amp than you would the 90 watt. So we'll go ahead and leave the bass about right here. On the 90 watt, you're probably going to have the bass at 9 o'clock or a little lower because it's got a lot of low end. The presence I'm going to leave in the middle. And this channel right here is a little more open and not as compressed. So you can get away with having the gain at about 3 o'clock, even for a good tight rhythm tone. You really can. So I'm going to go ahead and see how this sounds right here with these settings. And the overdrive pedal is off. So let's see what it sounds like with it off, and then I'm going to go ahead and kick it on because I'm going to finish dialing it in with the overdrive pedal. Because again, I always use an overdrive pedal, so why not finish dialing in the amp with it on? Because it does make a huge difference in how the amp sounds and feels. Okay, so I'm hearing some stuff that's kind of bugging me here, so let's go ahead and pull some of this stuff out. I'm going to put some more low end in this guy, and I'm going to put these faders in some pretty uncomfortable places for a lot of you guys. You're probably looking at me going, oh my god, you're really pushing those faders. Trust me, you can push these faders pretty far in this section here and still get a really good sound out of it. Because the rule is when you're dialing in an amp, you dial in with your ears, not your eyes. So a lot of times you're going to turn knobs and push faders on amplifiers in places that your eyes aren't comfortable with, but your ears and your hands really like. And that's really what matters at the end of the day. So here we go. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of high end, so I'm going to take this presence down, and I'm probably going to take this fader down a little bit here, because again, these are very powerful, and then we're going to find a good sweet spot for the high end here. Let's see where we're at with this. All right, that is much better. Do you see how powerful that is? I mean, I just took the fader down just a hair up here in the 6600 range, and man, it just made a huge difference. That's how much these faders matter here. So you can really fine-tune things quite a bit here and get a lot of great tonal options in this amplifier. Okay, so I think channel 1 is really good right now. Let me turn the overdrive back on and let's do another test before we move on to channel 2. I think that sounds really good. It feels great too. So that's basically the settings I would use. Obviously, we would fine tune those as time goes by, but I think that's a really good starting point. And again, look at the faders. Look at how exaggerated everything is. I mean, I got the mids scooped way down here, but it doesn't sound like a scooped mid amp like from the 90s or the 80s. It doesn't sound like that because, again, this amplifier has a lot of mids and a lot of low end in it, and it allows you to sculpt all of those things with extreme kind of settings here without taking all the mids out. You know what? I'm going to show you how powerful this fader is right here. This is where your mids live, okay? So right here is what I would consider a very appropriate setting for this fader. But I'm going to go ahead and play a riff, pull it all the way down, and show you what a scooped mid sound really sounds like on this amp. And then I'm going to gradually bring them back in, and I'm going to go a little too far with it to show you how much this fader really matters when it comes to the mids. And I'm just going to pull it right back down into the sweet spot, and we'll see where we land here. There you go. I think we found the sweet spot. It sounds freaking fantastic. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to channel 2. Now, channel 2 is a little more compressed than channel 1. Channel 1 is very percussive and it's a little more open, and that's what makes it so good for rhythms. But channel 2 is more designed for leads. You can use it for rhythms, no problem. I've done it and it sounds great, but it really, really thrives in the lead zone because of that nice compression that it has. All right, so let's go ahead and dial in channel 2 for a great lead tone. So I'm going to do, for starters, I'm just going to mimic what I did on channel 1 because those settings are great. And I'll just fine tune it from there for a good lead sound. Now, I'm going to turn the gain all the way up on the channel, but before I do, let me explain something about the gain on this amp, okay? This amplifier does have a lot of gain, but it allows you to turn it all the way up and not have too much saturation, okay? All of the gain is usable in this amp. So if I crank that gain all the way up on channel 2, it's not like I'm cranking up an EVH or something like that. You know, like on an EVH amp, you can have the gain at 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, even for leads, and you're going to be fine because there's so much headroom in that amp. But in this particular amp, because of the gain structure and the way it's designed and geared, you can crank the gain all the way up and it's not too much gain. Okay, so for anybody that's watching it's going, oh my god, you're cranking the gain all the way up. Well, again, in this amplifier, it's designed so that all of the gain is usable. Okay, so the gain all the way up on this amplifier is probably like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock on the EVH. I'm not kidding you. That's pretty much what it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and crank the gain on this. And I'm going to turn on the overdrive and see where we're at for a lead tone. Okay, that sounded really good and it felt great as well, but I'm still hearing something that I need for the lead to stick out in the mix a little more without hurting my ears. So I'm going to soften it up a little bit with some more mids, and I think that's probably going to be all I need to do. Maybe I'll back the presence down just a hair, and I think that that's going to be about it. I mean, the mistake a lot of people make is they crank their treble on their leads, and they're like, oh, but they'll stick out in the mix. Well, they'll stick out for the wrong reasons. I mean, you're making your amp too pointy and too harsh. So on leads, especially since you're doing like single notes and you're way up here on the neck and doing a lot of high notes and stuff, you want to soften the top end just a hair. Since this EQ section here is shared for both channels, even though you have individual other EQ settings here for each channel, I don't want to do too much here because I like the settings that I have. But what's great about this amplifier is I have presence, treble, and mids right here that I can adjust accordingly so that the lead channel still sounds very smooth, but it's got just enough top end to stick out in the mix properly. So now let's hear what this sounds like with the changes that I just made. And again, these changes are very subtle, but they really make a big difference. Okay, that was a lot better, and it was very subtle changes that I made, but they made a huge difference. I felt the top end was a lot smoother, and the lead still sung very nicely, and they had that really nice glassy tone that Mesas are known for. So I think that minimally we're off to a really good start with this amplifier, and then over the next few days or weeks or whatever, when you're playing with your band, or in mixes in the studio, or at home for band practice or whatever, you'll fine-tune some things from there, but for the most part, I think this is a great start. And depending on your pickups and the room and your cab and all that other stuff, again, you'll make some fine-tuning things from there. But that's basically how I get a good crushing tone out of this amp for rhythms and a really nice singing, glassy tone for the leads that's very pleasant, stands out in the mix just right, but it doesn't bother your ears when you listen to it, and you just love listening to it. Okay, so I'm going to finish this video with a really good tip for you guys that's worked for me very well. Like you see here, I have the amplifier on a stand. So what you would want to do is get like an amp stand or something like this, and you can put the amp on here and have your cabinet across the room from you, so you're not making adjustments on your amp while you're standing over the cab and the cab's, you know, blowing all the sound at your shins and you're making adjustments, and then you go sit down and you're like, oh, that sounds terrible. And you're constantly getting off the couch or whatever and making adjustments, sitting down and doing this and that. So the best thing to do to avoid all that and to get the best sound possible is to put the amp on a stand like this and have the cab across the room and get an extended speaker cable to go from the amp to the cab. And now you can make adjustments on the amp and hear those adjustments in real time without having to go back and forth, and you're going to hear it in the proper setting. And another thing that you could possibly do is put your cab up on a stand just slightly off the floor, tilted up at you so that it's hitting your ears, not your knees, and you get a really good sound out of that. Just keep in mind, as soon as you lift it off the ground, a lot of your low end will disappear, so you might overcompensate for that. And then when you put your cab back on the ground, you're going to be like, wow, it's so much bass. Just turn the bass down a little bit and you're good to go, because at least then you're not getting too much highs, because that could be an issue as well. And one of the biggest problems a lot of people have when they're dialing in their amps is they put too much highs on there and the treble's too high. Reason why is the cab is aimed at your knees. Your ears are up here. So aiming your cab at your face is probably the best thing that you can do, besides also having the amp right next to you. So again, you can make those changes in real time and not get off the couch and walk back and forth and make changes while the cabinet's pointed at your knees. I really think that you could really benefit from applying those to when you're dialing in your amp. It really does help. It's a small investment, but I'm telling you, your amp is going to sound way better if you do that. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm using in-ears because I'm monitoring what you guys are going to be hearing when you watch this. So my cab's right here, and I can assure you that wherever I stand in the room, if I don't use these, in different places, the cab sounds completely different. Like right here where I'm sitting, it has a lot less bass. But if I get up and stand directly in front of the cab, I get way more low end out of the cab. And that's the best place from where to dial it in, because again, you're going to get the cab throwing all the sound at you, and that's what the audience is hearing as well. They're hearing the direct sound from the cab, whether it's mic'd or pointed directly at them. So definitely make sure that you're in the right spot when you're dialing in any amplifier. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode and got something out of it. I really appreciate you watching this, and if you want me to do more of these, I have tons of amps here. I'd be happy to dial these in for you one at a time. Just let me know what one you want me to do next, and I'll be happy to put that in the next episode. Well, if you haven't subscribed, please do, because I got a lot of great stuff coming up, and I'll see you on the next one.